Hello! Welcome to Good Tips for Hard Times, where we find smart people to talk to us about mental health, well-being, and all things gaming. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Before we get started today, I would love everyone to do me a favor. Can you do that? Can everyone just do me one quick favor? At some point before the end of the day, can you tell 3 friends about the hotline? Because our free, confidential, emotional support hotline can only be there for folks if they know it exists. And you spreading the word is the best way to do that. So you can learn more about us at gameshotline.org, and you can check us out on your preferred social media platform. You know, the one that you use the most, but you probably hate the most, that one. We're at Games Hotline on all of them. And you can repost us, you can share those links, and do whatever you do on the social medias. It would mean so much to us to help us get the word out. So, great. Chad is telling me that some people don't have friends. Well, if that's the case, then I can't really help you on that one.
Tell yourself.
Yeah, you tell yourself. Maybe you can give us a call. So, all right. So, everyone, I'm Anita Sarkeesian. I'm a media critic, public speaker, and the executive director of the Games and Online Harassment Hotline, which, as I just said, is an emotional support resource for people who make and play games. I'm actually really excited about today's episode. It is about voice acting for video games, and I'm pleased to welcome back actor extraordinaire Sarah Elmaleh. You know Sarah from her work as the voice of the female freelancer in Anthem and Raider in For Honor, as Lizzie Carmine in Gears 5, and for many indies including Gone Home, Pyre, After Party. Longtime director and co-host of the Indiecade Awards in 2019, she also co-founded the free multilingual online games conference GameDev.world. As a games performance consultant and labor advocate, she acts as a bridge between actors and developers to foster deeper collaboration and best practices. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
So glad to have you back on.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Can you talk like that the whole episode?
I probably could. I did a writer's meeting last night, and I stayed in this voice, like giving feedback this way would somehow be funny and therefore soft. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why?
I love that. Did they enjoy it?
I don't think so. I mean, they have like a masterful deadpan. Like they're like the university kids that make you feel terrible about yourself. And I'm like trying to control the room and just be like, and I'm clowning. It doesn't work. Yeah, you can't clown and control the room.
I would enjoy it as a fly in the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Flies are the big thing right now.
That's like all we can talk about. Let's talk fly stuff. And their full many eyes or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So today I want to get into what is voice acting? What does it look like? Talking about getting into the industry. What the fuck is Mocap? Some of your experiences around that, and also like maybe some home setup tips we can dive into for folks who are trying to get a better audio quality, whether it's just like podcasting or, I don't know, lots of reasons people need better audio quality at home. So, yeah. For those of you who have been watching us every week, Sarah came on to an episode we had several weeks back about
labor stuff, I believe.
Cool. This is awesome.
That was 10 years ago. It was 2020.
It really was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
About labor organizing and union strikes and all of that kind of stuff. But we started talking so much about voice acting that I was like, oh, we have to have a whole episode dedicated to this. So let's, can you start with your origin story again and tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry and yeah.
Sure. After growing up loving games, I pursued the sort of parallel track of just acting. I kind of fell in love with acting in high school and yada yada, moved to New York City, was exploring a bunch of different categories, trying to figure out what I liked doing the most on the day-to-day, and what felt good at its best and what was like the worst at its worst, and how much of each you were going to likely get, etc. But I didn't know. I was doing like commercials, voiceover, and I was doing some, I guess, what else was I doing? I was doing a lot of indie theater. But I went to the only place I knew to go for an event. I finally decided I was going to invest in games and like try and figure out how to get into them a little bit more seriously. And but all I knew to go to was PAX. So I went to PAX, the first PAX East in 2010. And it was exciting. And but I met the real way in was through meeting one person who I hope doesn't mind hearing this story or knowing that it's floating out there all the time. I don't think so. It's just about me being rude. But I basically was having breakfast with my mom at the hotel, And and this will become a productive tip, by the way. Like I started, it's not just like a random anecdote. But I was having breakfast with my mom, and she saw some guy wearing a speaker badge at the buffet, and she was like, "You should go talk to him." And I was like, "That's a really rude thing to do. Like he's not even at the show floor, man. Like he's off the clock. Like why am I gonna do this?" But I did. I just went up anyway, and I was like, "What are you speaking about? Hi." And it was Richard LaMarchand, who is amazing. He was the co-lead game designer of the Uncharted series through Uncharted 3, and now he's been at USC for a long time teaching, because he has a beautiful soul that, as much as evidenced in this encounter, is all about sharing knowledge, information, and support. So once I had this conversation with him, I knew he was on Uncharted. He had said, when I said I was an actor, that they do wonderful things with acting. I went home, and I didn't have a PS4. I had an Xbox at that time. And so I watched all of Uncharted Drake's Fortune on YouTube. So from that point, I realized that there was really amazing work being done in games, really collaborative work between actors, that they'd kind of cracked the code of how to like take a lot of the sort of rich input that actors can have in that process from other media that we're kind of used to into games. But the real key, like the real actual answer to how I got into games, was following everyone that he followed on Twitter. Like I just followed everyone that Rich LaMarchand was following, and then I
this sounds
discovered...
so stalkery.
It sounds stalkery. It was like, but I mean, it does sound stalkery.
No, it makes sense. It totally 100% makes sense.
But yeah, I didn't know what else the space contained. So like from that, I found out what GDC was, the Game Developers Conference, and I've been going to that since 2011. From that, I found Baby Castles, which was an event kind of not company. It's like anything but a company. Why is that the word that came to mind? But it's a collective, and they would run, arcade style parties and stuff. And I met Dave Gilbert, who is creator, owner, Watch It Eye Games, and does tons of adventure games. And so I worked on a ton of adventure games with Dave through meeting him at Baby Castles. What else did I find? I mean, Killscreen. I started working at Killscreen after reading Killscreen, after learning about Killscreen from Richard LaMarchand's Twitter. So, so my way in was to, aside from cultivating my skills and craft as an actor, aside from cultivating other categories in a portfolio, demos and getting agency representation, not through games, I was putting myself in game spaces and meeting indie devs mainly, some AAA devs, but always AAA devs who don't touch the casting process, because once you get into the AAA space, the casting pipeline is totally siloed off from like your level designer. And I was like meeting like level designers and artists and all kinds of people and being like, "You're so fascinating. I would love to work with you on your games someday, but you can't help me there. That's fine."
It sounds like a very traditional, like old school networking style of like meeting people.
Yeah, it was, every game. So, I mean, I'm trying to think the number of games I've gotten from cold auditioning. Very, very small. Huge proportion of like, I shook a hand at a convention. I knew someone through a friend. I met this casting director through another talent or through somebody, more so in the AAA kind of zone. But I don't know what that says about my auditioning skill, which is not good things, I assume. So maybe that gives people hope that like, if you can actually do the job, then you just, actually the truth is that auditions are now very like comfortable for me and fun, and like they're less stressful than, I mean, I'm in the middle of Indiecade stuff, and like Indiecade stresses me out way more than
Sure. Well,
I audition to have a break.
Well, let's talk about okay, so I actually want to come back to auditioning. I think that could be really interesting here. But like, what is the difference between voice acting and physical acting? I don't know how we even describe that difference.
I feel like there's sort of a core. I don't know what fruit this is I'm about to describe. All right, there's a core to the to acting that is just pretty universal. I mean, that has to do with your life experience. It has to do with your emotional access. That has to do with the things that you find interesting, the kind of characterization that you find compelling, the interesting choices you're capable of making that aren't cliched or stereotypes. That's just that's true across the board, and you carry with you. On top of that, though, is technique. It's technique. It's your tool. So if you are uncomfortable with a microphone, a lot of people feel claustrophobic when they get into a studio or when they get in front of a microphone, knowing it's like a close-up camera. Like if they feel intimidated, which I think everyone does, but when you start out, by having such like close and full attention on everything that you're doing and conveying. That can be kind of scary. So you got to shed all that. I have definitely had actors. I remember putting up an actor or helping an actor audition for something that I loved from theater, adored from theater. And then they got into the booth and was just a little nervous. Just like wasn't the same. Just wasn't like their full kind of powerful self. So it's not something you can assume about a very good actor in another format. This is why we have sort of mixed results with celebrity stunt casting in games, right? Because you have some people who are just born to be fab at it, like just cross over beautifully. Like Martin Sheen, just like, sure, no problem. I'll do voiceover all day, whatever. And then other folks that I won't just call out have more trouble crossing over. Can
you explain a little bit why? Like we've all, so I assume most people tuning in have played games and heard voice acting, and like, you know, it's kind of hit or miss sometimes, right? Like there can you talk a little bit about why that is in terms of like what it means for someone to be good at voice acting in games specifically, not even like a linear narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of reasons why you can have compassion for not to ask for compassion from my kin, but yes, also because it is challenging. The key things about doing game voiceover is I feel you have the least information about the world and your scene partner. I mean, you have almost nothing. It's a very purely imagination-driven performing process. Because you're going to get in there, you're going to have your dialogue all out of order. You're going to do maybe, 2 lines of dialogue where the player, and it helps if you understand what games things are, so you understand what these interactions are like and what these states are. Okay, the players come up to you and you're offering your wares. Next time you're set on fire because like surprise bandits have run in or whatever, and you're doing all of that totally out of order. 2 or 3 takes in a row, both of which must be accurate to the direction you've been given and different at the same time. You're offering variety. That's something that improv actors are very good with. Improv is very good for voiceover, but other actors might not. Other actors, I remember seeing someone in a audition space kind of beating out their lines on their script, like you would in drama school, like with breaths and choices and beats and shifts. And I was like, that's beautiful, but you're going to toss that after the first take. So I hope you're ready for that. I don't find that worth the pen's strength, but that's just me. So you're creating variety on the fly. You're just, you don't know, you may not know what the environment looks like. Sometimes you get to see. You don't know who your scene partner is. Sometimes you get to hear. Sometimes you get to know. Sometimes they don't know yet answers for these things. So all you have is whatever tidbits of information you're getting from your director, who knows how blind you are in there, and your own engine of imagination and your level of commitment with that through that uncertainty. Because if you're sounding half committed to a scream, you're going to have to do it again. You're going to hurt your voice. Like you have to be fully, you don't know what's going on, but doesn't matter. You better give it 100% to get through this session. And that is definitely, those are all skills that are incredibly flexed and relied upon in games, maybe more so. I mean, I've been doing a lot of dubbing recently, and there it's the opposite opportunity, both. But you see everything. There I see everything. I know exactly how much my character is exerting herself. I know who she's talking to. I know what the circumstances are. I know her mood. I know the choices she's made. I know everything. The challenge is to interpret that faithfully and to and it's just very technical about matching it perfectly and doing it over for minuscule frames of lip flaps and whatever. So just to contrast that, those are the different challenges those are both voiceover challenges, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I see there's a bunch of questions popping up in chat, so I just want to let you all know that I see them, and I will integrate them because they are going to be kind of related to some of the things that we're going to bring up. So thank you, and please keep dropping your questions in. So one of the things around this, I'm wondering, so for example, you brought up Naughty Dog, which is known for really good voice acting, right? It's known for very superior voice acting where that feels consistent throughout, whereas there are other games that do good voice acting, but there are some games where, like you're talking about, it feels like someone is like the actor doesn't know what the right tone is for that particular interaction, or that it'll just like the inflection will change and spike when it doesn't make any sense. Is that you were talking about how everything is out of order. Is that also a product of the direction you're getting, or do you get to know the full story of a game before you're given it? Is it just like a bare script?
It's rarely in script form. It's almost always in Excel spreadsheet form, which again is a new thing. Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah. It's funny. There's a game that I worked on where like the most I kind of know about what's happening is from the file naming. It'll be like alert state, guard seized, and you're like, all right, oh, okay.
So you kind of need to know about games to be able to interpret that as well, right? Because you can be like, you know, like if you don't know anything about games, you might not know what that kind of environment feels like or should sound like.
There are many, I would say most of the voice actors I know don't necessarily play games. I think there's a younger generation of game voice actors that have come up loving games and they know games. And so not to generalize, but you can be a very good game voice actor who's just becomes, again, comfortable in that unknowing, just intuitive as heck. You know, once you do a few game sessions and you become familiar with some of these different states, like, you know, the same old chestnuts of like, you know, alert, dying, searching, then you can do it. But I think you save my understanding is that you save a lot of time in the booth explaining those things to people if they know what they are. If they're like, oh yeah, sure, I've played games, I get it. Yeah. But then once you understand the idea of what it is, how, you know, understanding the specificity of like you're saying, the tone of the world, the environment, how close are you to each other physically. Sometimes that varies. Sometimes you have to do a take that works just as well when the players started walking away and they're 50 yards away as they are when they're like 10.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't know, or it's variable. But yeah, if someone's projecting or their level of intensity doesn't match, then it's like the select they took from one session just didn't match. They didn't have the time to kind of like do, I guess, QA or whatever it would be on the other person's choices that they made in their session. This is another problem, is because we don't have each other in our sessions most of the time. Drives me nuts. So that would be why. It's not because they don't know what they're doing.
Why is that? Like, yeah. So I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you are doing, you were talking about dubbing, but if you're like for animation or something, would you have the actors in the room together or like in the same session? Or is this a voiceover issue in general that it's usually scheduled separately and it's not unique to games?
I actually think it's becoming more of a voiceover thing. It used to be, I feel like, more of a games thing. I haven't had anyone in my dubbing session. Sometimes I hear the other person, but I also have the other actor in the other language, which helps. Yeah, and I feel like animation was always was largely ensemble for a long time, but now that there's more celebrities in there, the issue is really scheduling. Yeah. For linear media, the issue is for all things. The issue is scheduling, but then, you know, for games on top of that, the non-linearity makes it very difficult to kind of have a scene flow that would make a productive session. There's just so much out of order, and scenes are, you know, whatever, 2 minutes at a go, tops. That sort of having everyone in and making the most of that session, I think, is actually sort of a logistical challenge, is my impression. But scheduling is a beast. Scheduling is
it's
tricky.
Certainly is.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned like you've mentioned this several times, both in our previous interview and now, about like voice strain and like hurting your voice. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how that happens and how to prevent it? Like, is it something unique to games, or is it something just in acting in general?
I think, acting in general, there are times when I watch television or movies and I cringe because I'm like, Rusty, oh God, I could hear it. I could hear the like split in the throat. Like, oh, Rusty, take care of your voice. I'll just use an example that I've had not to do that I love watching. I wonder where it is on his Instagram or Twitter, but Darren DePaul, who's the Hulk in the latest Avengers game, I love watching him roar. He does something so clever because he doesn't project through it. He's not pushing harder. And you know that when they post-process it, it's going to sound really booming, but I can't do it. It's like, but it sounds more rich and full than that. But he knows that he doesn't have to push his voice to extremes in order to get that vocal sound that will then be fleshed out and filled out by the folks taking it on the other end. So he's like, I mean, and not only that, but everything else he does is all there. Like his bass is there. I mean, this is not just a Darren DePaul rant, but that is a man who has made a career out of working his voice really hard and staying safe. So just as a student, as an admirer, but vocal strain, to explain, is just, it's when you hurt your voice. It's when you you have two vocal folds and they slam against each other. Well, they don't. The goal is not to slam them, but they come together to make sound. And if you are slamming them, sorry, did I hurt your ears?
Okay.
Sorry. If you slam them, you bruise them or hemorrhage them. I think the hemorrhage is a bruise, or you can tear them, and then that's really bad. I have a little bit. I'm very paranoid because I have learned that you don't have to lose your voice to have done damage to it. So it can be a very subtle thing. So I'm just like, did I yell too much the other day?
I was going to ask, do you worry about vocal strain when you're not working, just like in your daily life? Is it something that's on your mind?
It's my favorite way to get out of business parties that I don't want to be at anymore.
Oh, right. Like if you're at a loud event and you have to yell over, that is your career, is your voice.
My bedtime. Bye. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's transition a little bit. Talk to me about, I'd like to hear a little bit about the different, well, okay, hold on. I just went in a million ways. So, let's stay in this orbit a little bit. Because I want us to talk a little bit about the difference between like mocap and then like studio. Well, they're both studios, but like just voice acting. And so when you are doing voice acting, whether you're at a studio and it, there's engineers and stuff in front of you, or you're doing it from home, like what does that look like?
From home, I would take you on a little journey, but I'm now so entrenched in my spot.
Next time.
Show you my little box of happiness. But it's like I have a blanketed cube. It's like 3x3. It's heavy, like moving blankets. And then I read off my iPad inside. I have this mic, just put this mic in there. This is a Neumann TLM 102. Frankly, it's a little bright for my voice. We make do. I've been meaning to upgrade this microphone for like 10 years. It's fine. It's a very professional microphone. It's just not a perfect fit for my voice. I run it to an Apogee 1. That's an interface. That goes to my little laptop, MacBook Pro. So it's very stripped down in my home setup. I also have, I have a good internet connection. Nowadays, I'm, more as the entire industry has shifted to home session recording instead of like the odd promo stuff or, indie games. For me, like indie games, commercials, that kind of stuff could happen from home. But now just about every session is from home. And so that means greater connectivity stuff, software stuff. Source Connect is what everyone's using. And then I will patch in. I'll have a director patch in over Skype. If I'm delivering a local file, there's two ways to do this. Me going in a million directions. The connectivity route means that if you have a good enough internet connection and a solid enough software to share that audio, then your engineer can use that it's essentially finished quality audio and on the other end. And so they can edit it and place it and use it on the fly. And then when you're done with the session, you're done. You should be good. And then you have, voice directors direct you through the session. If I don't have that, or if the other person doesn't want to use that for so many indies, for me, it was more listening over Skype. Maybe I would screen share if they wanted to look at my waveforms and help me engineer for me. And then I would, save the local file, a wave, and then deliver the wave after the fact. So that's from home. I do a lot of unsupervised promo stuff too, where I just they send me copy, I send it back. Bada bing, bada boom, we're done. What else? Yeah, and then in session is you just basically the difference is just not wearing so many hats, and I encourage it. Like everyone, folks save money that way. Sometimes that's the difference between a project being, especially an indie, being able to do voiceover or not. So I get that, but having an engineer, a professional engineer, I love my engineers, so I feel like I actually worry about loving my engineers too much. Some of the ones that I love the most, I'm like, I can't wait to work with you again. You make me sound so good. Like the best engineer I can think of right now, he's almost more keyed into my energy than the director. He's seeing when I'm because he can see me through the glass, even if the director isn't there. He knows when I've absorbed the direction and he can see when I'm about to give a take. He can see when I'm about to project more. So he's riding those levels and not wasting any takes because of something on his end of like something distorting or whatever.
Oh, wow. Do you feel like you get So with like live performance, like one of the reasons that it's hard for those of us who do public speaking to be transitioning to everything online is that you don't see your audience and you don't get that energy reaction from them. Is there a similarity there in terms of like going into studio versus doing it at home?
I love it.
You love going into studio.
Going into studio. I love going into studio because like it just helps me switch my head into work gear better. Like it gives me a reason to put on clothing and like, You know what I mean? Like,
which is a thing we would never have said before this year.
Except I would, because otherwise I'm at home. Like, I work from home. If I'm at, I would be in my PJs until I go out to dance or run or whatever. So yeah, even when I, now everything is obviously auditioning from home and, recording from home. But even before this time, I, with the option to record from home auditions, I was going into my agency every day to work with their in-house booth director, because I love her direction. She's so amazing. She's such an actor-oriented person. And it makes it so much more fun to me to work with somebody and play around. So then it feels even more like play when you have a play buddy. So yeah, absolutely. There's a big, I love vibing with someone and feeling like we're, especially with directors I really like, then we're like getting closer and finding new things that I wouldn't necessarily find by myself.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I want to talk about Mocap. Can you say what Mocap is and talk about like what that process feels like and looks like and how it's different than sitting in a booth?
Yes, vastly. So Mocap stands for motion capture. There's also performance capture, or I call it PCAP. I think people call it PCAP, perf cap. There's so much jargon, and it's so deep that it's hard to even Google some of the stuff that we say. It's like, which makes me frustrated. I don't like that as a barrier to understanding. But yeah, PCAP. So that is when you're getting more data from the actor's performance than just their voice. That's when you are putting folks on a volume or a sound stage that's got a million cameras pointed at you, or infrared whatever setups. There's a couple different ways to do it. Light, ones where the balls give off light, and ones where they reflect it. But you're putting markers on key joints and spots on your body to reflect kind of as full articulation as you can as data points into the system that you're recording into. And you might be getting voice at the same time. You might be getting face at the same time if you have a camera here and face markers here, similar. So that, and then you do have your scene partners. Thank God. Then you do go in and get to act with each other, and it's that same jazz. I feel like that's like what I'm looking for. That my flow state is that jazzy thing where you're like vibing. I live for that. When I was doing theater, I loved listening. I was like, this is my part where I don't have to think about my lines right now. I'm just watching you be amazing and feeling something authentic about what you're doing. That's the job. Yes. So then I went into voiceover. I don't know how that happened, but So then you're using your whole body. You have your fellow actors to make decisions with in concert, and not just about how you sound, but about how you are taking up space together. And sometimes the genius of Naughty Dog, I think, is that they understand blocking and scene work in that way, where they know when you don't have to have a line on something to get something across, and you can just use your physical relationship to each other to communicate how things are going or what you're feeling, or just your face. That I think is a key. We see a lot of overwriting in games, just sort of over commenting or over explaining about how people feel at times. And I think that a lot of that starts to go away when you realize how much power is in these other facets, not only of an actor's performance, but of your cinematic, whatever your storytelling means in your game. So that's fun. Motion capture is when you really are just doing body, and that might be for stunts, or if you have a split performance where it's just a motion capture actor and a voiceover actor dubbing over them later.
Are there voiceover actors that would never do mocap, that they're just purely voice and would never do anything physical in that regard?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm trying to think of any if they can't do it or just don't feel like it or just don't want to. It's a long day. Game sessions are 4 hours. People can start to flag around between 2 and 4. So but a performance capture shoot is a full day, 8 hours,
which is like an acting session, right? And so is the acting or like the physicality of the acting in mocap kind of the same as you would do on a TV show or a movie, or is it different in some ways?
It's a great question. So Amy Hennig explained this to me early on. I met Amy, I don't know if it was through Richard or Josh or Tom Bissell maybe, but I met her before I had done almost anything, and I just expressed how much of a fan I was of the series, and for whatever reason, she trusted me not to be.
Amy Henning worked at Naughty Dog on Uncharted. I don't know how this became the Naughty Dog stream.
I don't know.
There's
either,
lots of games that use
when
mocap.
I talk about the watermark, I tend to go
she's
there.
still a game creative director. I don't know where she landed. Is she at her own studio now or doing something at... Anyways.
I think there was an announcement. I should know this, but but anyway, this is before... You're right. So I credit her with developing essentially the Naughty Dog process of, she involved a fantastic and experienced veteran TV director and other things, I think, Gordon Hunt. And they were the ones that sat down and were like, how do we just pull things from the acting process that we do in other rehearsals? And among other things, from other processes to games to make these characters the best they can be. So that's why I kind of go back to her, because I think she really was the one who changed the game on that. Hi. I can't say that on games. I don't like that
it's
I
all
just
right.
did that.
It's all
anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But she sat me down and she explained this to me before I had done anything. She just gave me a path. She was like, you're going to need to show this. You're going to need to show that you have theater experience or on-camera experience. We need to be able to see, blah, 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 and here's how it works. And I was like, thank you, just for giving this roadmap to a nobody. Very gracious. But basically, the voiceover voice stays there, which has, a lot more intimacy than perhaps a theater voice, but also more resonance than an on-camera voice. So if I were on camera, I could just probably talk like this all the time and it wouldn't really matter. But if I were doing the same thing kind of for voiceover, it would have a little bit more on voice. You would you know what I mean? Like you would hear.
Yeah, that was a very distinct difference. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't mumble your way through a game. I mean, you can try. There's some mumbling maybe, but it will sound like voiceover mumbling so that you hear it. It's a little bit tuned up without yelling. Because if you're filling, she described it as like maybe theater in the round in a small theater, not a 200-seat Broadway theater, but a small one, as far as movement. So movement-wise, you cannot, on-camera people are used to acting in frame. This is what drives me, if I may. I hope casting directors who might see this don't consider me ungrateful, but I don't really love doing self-tapes for mocap and PCAP because I'm not used to acting to frame. Which means I'm acting in this box. I have to make the most of this box that you see. And on a motion capture volume, there's no frame. So on-camera actors who are looking for their frame are like, how big should I be? Like they're confused because it's all the cameras are everywhere. It's fully 3D and it's as big or as small as it needs to be. But you are heightening your movement. You can't just be dead arms. Like you have to have maybe like a small theater amount of energy in your body. So yeah. So small theater, movement and voiceover or small theater voice is the distinction. Right. Yeah.
I was at, actually Ubisoft Toronto was the last place I was before lockdown happened. It was the last trip I took. And, I was speaking on a panel there, but they gave me a tour of their new mocap facilities, their new studio facilities, and they were shooting something there, and it was really interesting to see. But what I found, I'd seen mocap studios before, but they have a whole section of props. And so in that, the warehouse of props, I think, which was their old studio or whatever, there is I wish I had the photo prepared. I'll tweet it out if I can find it, where it was that, it's like a tiny little... how do I describe this? There's a word for it. It's a type of photography, but there's a stool in the middle and you sit on it and it's 100 cameras pointing at you. And it's just the wildest thing to look at. And they had to label the one camera that's actually the camera that would take the picture. But it was very fascinating. And then in the room, all the props that you use are also mocapped, right? So there's guns and baby bottles and whatever with little balls all over them. And it was just and they're weighted so that you can get the real weight of them, even though they're not real props. It was a very interesting experience to see that, because I don't think a lot of folks get the opportunity to see exactly the behind the scenes and how your favorite games, how much goes into each of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I got to feel, I think it must have been my axe or something. And for Honor, we had a prop in the voiceover studio, and someone else had done the mocap already. So that was really fun. That I think Jason Vandenberg was so passionate and involved and wonderful and helpful. But I think he brought in a big axe prop that I could just kind of And then I also got to see animations for every single attack, which, oh my God, that's so helpful.
Is it common that someone different does the mocap than the voice acting?
I think it used to be extremely common. I think maybe it's becoming less common. I mean, I think unless I am very much mistaken, there was a different mocap actor for John DiMaggio on Gears, and although the rest of the cast did their own performance capture. So that might be an example of a voice actor who's like, I'm good. I'll dub it later. I'm not sure. I genuinely don't know the story behind that, but I think that's true.
All right.
I could be wrong.
That's
Fact
okay.
check me on that.
Yeah. Don't believe anything you hear here, folks.
No.
It's all a lie. I want to take a question from the audience, from chat. So Rayanessa asks, have you noticed a change in diversity character types over time?
Yeah. Yes.
And I'll add, like, how has that affected your career, potentially?
How's that affected my career? I mean, I don't know. I mean, there are characters in my past that I probably would not accept now. Even ones that had, like, you know, I have a Japanese background, but it's far back enough that I've changed kind of my position on that over years to not, I'm like, it's not close enough. You know, it's like four generations back. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how it's changed. Sometimes you'll get casting packets and you're like, there's no white women in this. That's great. Like, cool. Go nuts.
As in, there are women, they're just not white women.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's like, just to clarify, because that could also mean like it's all dudes, which is not
white men.
far in games history.
No. Which is amazing.
But so are there more opportunities for women in general in games than there were before? Have you noticed the change in that?
Yeah. I think there was a time when we didn't have women enemies at all, unless I'm mistaken.
Yes.
So
I can speak to that for sure.
Yeah, you've looked at the data. You've looked at this very closely. I've voiced a bunch of like female baddies, and it's super fun. I love women doing creature voices. Morla Gorondona is someone who does a ton of creature voices. Misty Lee created the iconic clicker sound in Last of Us. Like, women doing creature voices is probably my like the square bullseye of my like horny for voiceover like section.
Nice.
Yeah, because it's the best. So yeah, women are doing more creature voices. They're playing more enemy types, and I mean, as a player, I feel like I noticed it even more because I don't tend to see. My agents know not to send me stuff I can't go out for usually, unless they sort of send a whole packet dump, which I don't typically do. So I don't see the stuff that I'm not up for. I just see the games and the results and the folks in them, and I feel like I'm seeing much more diversity in there, and of body type too, and of apparel, for God's sake. You know, I mean, I feel like I do think things are improving. That's my feeling.
Nice. Let's talk about a little bit into your experience. I'm curious, what is like a really great voice acting session for you, and what is like a really bad one? Like, if you have examples of it, or if you can just talk generally about it, I think that would be helpful to know, like the constraints of the field.
Yeah. A really good voiceover session is where I feel, you know, I hope this doesn't sound precious, but like where I feel like I trust the director and we kind of get each other. That makes it both fun and efficient. I think sometimes the director can have good things to say, but they'll sort of spin their wheels on it more than I actually need. And then Jennifer Hale is really big about that. I think she actually puts her foot down, or she'll be like, I got it. I'm ready. Like, I feel something. Let's go, before I stop feeling it. You know, which I'm not quite at yet. Maybe I will one day. Yeah, so that's, you know, where we feel like we understand each other well enough that even slight changes or like simple phrases make me fully understand what they're saying and have like an impulse to act. Becky Dodd at Naughty Dog is like that. She gives great direction. Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many voice directors. I've been very lucky. I feel like I haven't had as many horror stories as many of my other peers. I can think of a friend of mine who's just been through the ringer on some directors, man. Not always male, actually. It's not always male, but I feel like a tough session, one where they're creating more work for you to act through whatever tension that you're having with them or frustration that you're having with them in order to feel safe and loose and playful. To me, bad direction is frustrating because it makes your job as an actor so much more difficult to try and deliver that like open, spontaneous interpretation that you're looking for. And I'm like, why are you doing that? You're making this so much harder for both of us. Sometimes that's line direction, and sometimes a line direction a line read is fine. Doing the delivery of how you want the actor to do it to them. Sometimes it just sort of the emphasis that you're going for. Sometimes it's efficient and totally kosher. But if you are puppeteering, the ones that are the absolute worst are when I feel like I'm being marionetted, kind of like inch by inch, phrase by phrase, clause by clause, into the exact inflection and interpretation that the director wants. If I feel like I'm there to kind of squeeze into a character that they have very clearly in mind, instead of me having auditioned or me knowing each other, and then I have the character in me, I know who they are. That's when I get to be free and playful and confident, and like, so that sense of like who holds the character is really key. Like, is it the actor? Did you hire the actor? Are they the character? And you're working with them to kind of shape what specific decisions are being made in a scene? Or are they struggling and striving to kind of understand and unlock your brain to figure out who this person is and then sound like them? That's a nightmare.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
And that sounds like it reminds me of what you're talking about earlier with like, how much information are you given about the character to even be able to inhabit or to be able to have some ownership over it, and the tension between those two things. Yeah. All right. So I want to move into something a little more practical. I think we had mentioned like recording from home and what that means. And I'm just wondering, like, can you give a couple of tips for folks who want to start recording at home, who want to build their own portfolio, or who want to just have better audio quality in general for the things that they're already doing?
I mean, I think the audio quality part starts with understanding what audio quality is, because it's very easy to find recommendations for microphones. And I mean, I'm in a state where I'm like, how do I build a streaming setup? Like, I don't know. So that's my learning curve. But what I do have is an ear for audio. So, I mean, over the years of auditioning and having like worse setups in my closet and worse microphones that had soft noise going into the computer, that was just like, USB mics are affordable, but I would encourage people to consider upgrading. Some are good, but that's the risk, because you're going to fight your equipment. The more that you do cut corners on the cost, the more that you're going to fight your equipment. And if you don't even know what you're fighting about it, that's the real trouble. So what you need to be able to learn is to hear. You're like, what's distortion sound like when my voice is peaking on the microphone? What does room noise sound like? How do I edit if I need to edit auditions? How do I edit so it sounds clean? Cutting on consonants, ideally, especially plosives, is easier than cutting on vowels, things like that. But so, training your ear. If you can find YouTube videos on training your ear for how to edit dialogue, and what you're listening for, that will go a long way, because then no matter what setup you have, what your work is going to be in fixing it or getting it, or how to even know when you have a good setup or not. So that was years of just listening and, obsessing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It didn't even occur to me that like my streaming setup is different than my podcast setup, that I use different mics. I use different, I just didn't really think about it until you just said it. Like, so for our podcast, we all have little Zoom recorders, and we have Shure mics, like XLR mics that we plug in, and we all do local recording, and then we send the file to an editor, and they put it all together. For streaming, like I'm just using, a Yeti. They're fine. Like it doesn't really
Yeti.
super matter. They're fine.
That's what I hear.
And it's plugged in with a USB, right? Like your audio quality expectations are different in those scenarios, I think. So that's good to know.
And your movement is different too. I mean, if you like, a lot of folks have a Sennheiser, which I probably would sound better for my voice. That's a shotgun mic. If I were to try to use that for streaming, that means that the band of pickup is much more narrow. So if I'm like streaming and I'm freaking out over here and doing whatever, like that I'm going to go off mic like that. So knowing like how, what you're using it for is, it's key.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense too. And before I had like sound paneling, which you all can't see, like I recorded in the closet, like, like the buffering of my clothes helped the sound feel less echoey. So like there are ways to, excuse me, there are ways to get better, but I love that advice of like actually learning, really understanding how vocals work and how training yourself to understand that stuff will make a huge difference if you're, if you're serious about your audio quality. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to please send in your questions, chat, if you've got them. I want to wrap up with a bit of a like, how do you get into this industry? But there is some tension there that I want to acknowledge. One of the things that we were just talking about, and I feel like this is probably true across different industries, and I certainly experienced this, where people will be like, how do I get into your industry, to someone who's already established? And their pathway in is going to look very different because their pathway in was 10 or 20 years ago. So, like, I feel like I asked that question because I'm sure there are people who are interested in figuring out, like, what's the best way for them. But but with the caveat and understanding that, like, which you shared with us earlier is very different than what is probably what young folks are doing today to break in, or not young folks, just people in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like what the part that I cling to is the idea that indies are still showing their games, will someday be showing their games personally at events. I immediately had to revise that. That was my one bit of it, like, persistent advice. Well, if we all go back to having games, conventions in person, indies are often there to show their game. They are the labor they have at hand, and so they show their games and engage press and and fans. And so if you if you have done the work already of preparing yourself, of learning your craft, of getting a really good demo, and having an attractive looking website in place for people to learn more about you. Maybe you've gotten representation, maybe not. But if you are able to then play this game, kind of connect with this creator, I would recommend being sincere. Like, talk to people who make games you like and ask actual questions about the game and their experience, and, like, get to know them. Like, I'm looking to make connections with kindred creators. I'm not trying to, like, I feel like the practice, even the challenge when I'm at a place where, like, I kind of just want to work on stuff that I'm not picky. I'll take stuff that comes to me, but I'm not seeking any old job anymore. I'm not, like, trying to get it. So that there's a sense that, like, people who respond to you and you respond to, that's the good stuff. That's the stuff you want to be doing anyway. And those are the most authentic networking conversations and relationships that you can have. So many of my networking relationships are personal relationships, and I like it that way. It just means that we actually care about each other. And it means that you can play a long game. Some of these, I mentioned Tom Bissell earlier. I met him probably 10 years before we did a game together. He thought of me for a game. And if I'd been sitting there thinking, like, when's Tom going to put me in a game? Then I would have tanked that would have been awful. That's a terrible way to live. So you can't think of it that way. But as long as you can still just, like, go up to indie creators at events and kind of say you're an actor and you're ready to go, you're experienced and you're ready to work, like, then that probably sticks. I mean, I came up doing, Voice 123 stuff. I think the pay to play market is bigger than ever. It may be also more competitive than ever as a starting place before you're a union and you can get union jobs. The union jobs tend to be concentrated more in the agency space, and so getting an agent is the way there. Getting an agent is tricky. Getting any of these things is tricky, but for me, I had an agent in New York City. I built up commercial work and a good solid commercial offering there. Knowing what categories make money for agents makes a difference. If you go in there being like, I just do games, that's less attractive than maybe, commercials used to be an earning category and now less so because the market is shifting. But
yeah, we actually have a question about agents that might be good to pop in right now. Rainessa says, I'm curious about the role of agents during early careers and how much negotiating power there is and how visible people's rates are. If you could speak to that.
Visible people's rates are and negotiating. I guess that part I don't quite.
I think we're just wondering, like, are agents useful in early careers, and like, do they actually help with negotiating and getting better rates? Is kind of how I'm interpreting some of that.
I see. So, I mean, early career, it depends on the agency. At any stage of your when you're starting out, an agency who doesn't necessarily care about you or pay attention to you is better than nothing. That's just true. It looks more professional. It has someone you can at least toss if you're pounding the pavement, as I was all the games I was getting was on my own Steam, and you can at least send them to the agent if it's, it's work that they cover. So that's good. But ultimately how helpful an agency is to you is how invested they are in you, which is tricky. I didn't have such a great fit before I moved to LA, and I felt like they were actively, the agent they had on games was actively in my way. I was like, I would tell them that BioWare was casting and they wouldn't even respond to my email. And I was like, do you represent me or not? Like, what the hell, man? She's not there anymore.
Thank God.
Not because of me. Yeah, not because of me. She also liked to take credit for having found me, even though she did not sign me. Her boss did later. She saw me in a games session, like a games seminar where she was supposed to be teaching us how to do games. And she was like, they heard your voice and they don't pay good. So why bother? And I'm like, what? You're not wrong, but screw you.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so an agency that isn't genuine in their interest in you and their belief in you is a tricky one. And that's a hard miracle thing to try and find. I was gunning for my agency here in LA from the get-go. I knew that they had, you can do your research, like follow the IMDb trail of who your favorite game performers are from the games that you like, find out who the actors are, find out who their agents are, and start to see patterns. You'll see folks show up in the same places. And so from doing that, I knew that SBV had a lot of my favorite performers. By the time I came to have a meeting with SBV, I had two different referrals, one from Jennifer Hale, which counts for a lot because we'd met in a different professional context. And she's been immensely generous and kind to me. And then my manager, who had a strong working relationship with them, my manager, who I started out as a consultant that I paid. So I went from paying her, by the hour to her getting paid when I got paid. And by that time I had I cut together, a demo for my indies that I'd done. I had at least a working, track record in New York with commercials and things. And so I went into that meeting in a much stronger place than I did when I was just starting out. So yes, yeah. Agencies are essential for, and ultimately, like all the games that I do now, those calls come through my agency. They just do. That's where they go. That's where casting directors go for their first round,
yeah.
and maybe their only round of casting. So Starting out, yes, get a local agency. There are lots of local agencies. To other markets that outside of LA or New York City. My first agency was in Atlanta. And I drove through Atlanta once, but I've never lived in Atlanta, because I had a solid home setup.
Yeah.
So start with early agencies. Ideally make a case for yourself, share what you're passionate about. Be honest and confident in what you are capable of. I found I'm blessed that SBV is, I feel like I can talk about anything that I'm worried about or that I'm interested in. And it feels like a collaboration where we both want the best out of this for both of us. And I feel like that conversation is very open. So even a small agency, if that agent really cared about you and was like accessible to you and gave you time, and attention, that I would reckon that would count for a lot. Eventually you're going to need someone who the jobs go to,
right.
But yeah, that's the two things you need is the jobs coming to them and them taking you seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Sparkly Kiss, who's one of our great mods, that says, what do you do after a more difficult voice session, like the yelling and pain reactions?
STFU. I shut the fuck up. I go home and we can swear, right?
Yes.
I did the acronym so I wouldn't have to swear, and then I wanted to have it clear, so I swore. Yeah, ideally, I live alone, so it's a little bit easier. Although right now my brother is staying with me, which is harder. But living alone, I can come home and not talk. I will drink a lot of water. I should have been drinking water from the day before that session, ideally, and through that session. I'll drink water, hot tea, hot water, and just rest. Really the only thing you can do. Someone pointed this out, this basic fact of biology that I love, because it's like people forget. Because, I'll do cough syrup during a session if I'm just to kind of stay loose. But that stuff doesn't touch your vocal folds, because if it did, you would drown. So you can't actually put anything on them to help them. The only thing you can do is hydrate them from around and rest them.
That is interesting to know about our biology.
Yeah, it's a real eye opener.
All right.
Yeah. So
I have a great last question for us.
Sweet.
It's Liz Rod says, do you think it's ever too late to get into the industry or change careers?
No, I don't see why. I don't think so. The industry, I will say, the one thing I will say is that there is ageism, like there is everywhere. And so there's ageism in characters for sure. As far as just how many older folks, or older sounding folks are in games as characters that people want to see and want to write, which should change, frankly. So that's the only thing I would say. But As long as you have a voice and you are talented, there are roles out. I mean, I know Nancy Lenari is one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She's Aunt May in the recent Spider-Man. And what a veteran. She's just such a G. I love her so much. And I think that I love sitting and listening to Nancy talk about her life and her career. And like all of that life experience is so valuable to an actor. Like that's the juice. That's the stuff you have to work with. And so if you have more of it, that's so cool. And you know yourself as an actor, you're calm. Like you're so, I think that obviously as I get older, I hope to have tons to offer. So that's not the question. I think you just might be fighting that as sort of making a value, because again, you have to make your case as a value to an agency or to something. And so just sort of like that would be the challenge is just that piece is finding out how many breakdowns they're getting for folks of a certain age. But if you do all that legwork and you're ready to go, then I see no reason why you wouldn't have something, you have your demo in place, you are trained, you are experienced, you're confident, you're calm, you're fun, you're flexible, all that there. Oh my God. Yeah, do it. There's no like inherent, that's why I love voiceover is that like, I started dancing ballet when I was little, like that career stops at 30 something, like that's just over. And I kind of looked down it and I was like, that's not worth it to me. I want to do something that I can do till I keel over. And voiceover is one of those things and tango is one of those things. So, yeah. I hope that that's encouraging. I want to be honest, but I want people to, I feel the same about developers. I think we need to keep and cherish and treasure our older developers for the same exact reason, because their life experience adds something new and their restlessness. They don't want to just make the same game for 50 years. They want to make new stuff. And they have something to say and something to share and a new story to tell. So like, yes, please, let's just take care of all of our older folks in their professions because we benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, the ones that can at least, progress with like social justice values.
Yeah.
At least, yeah, totally. But yeah, I hear you for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Because you're gonna get better at your craft. You're going to learn more and get better at it. And there's a lot of value to
math,
that.
honey.
Just as there is a lot of value to the freshness of young people coming in. Yeah. I think that ageism is, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that we can talk about and think about it along the spectrum of age and how we like really devalue and decredit young people and also think that old people should go when it's like, really, who the fuck are we in our like 30s and 40s? What do we know? We're just in the awkward middle stage. We're just still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the session. Got to ask all the questions, and I'm always like, "How does that work?" I'm always curious about it. What do you got to plug? Where can people find out more about you? What do you want to share?
Okay. Well, let's see. I have a game out. I'm in Star Wars Squadrons.
Cool.
Which is obviously it's so exciting to me. This guy sat in my chair, like in my next to my in my passenger seat. This is my Wilson. This is my like Wilson from Castaway in my drive across country moving from New York to LA. Anyway, Star Wars Squadrons. You can choose me as your Imperial voice for your pilot. So I think you have 2 pilots. You have one for each side, and I'm Specialist A. So choose me to fly your TIE fighter. I just got my VR helmet. I'm so excited. So that and. You kind of like to watch foreign TV. I did an English dub for a Brazilian.
Hold on, you cut out for me, so I'm assuming you cut out for everybody else. So start that next one again.
Am I here now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. If you're the kind of person who likes to watch foreign television with English dubbing, you can catch me on Good Morning Veronica, Brazilian crime drama, and I basically do this.
Well, okay. I don't know if you cut out for everyone, but I'm just gonna. Did you say Good Morning Veronica?
Yes.
Okay. So Sarah's internet is getting a little wonky, or at least my taking in of it, one or the other, who knows. But go play Star Wars Squadrons. Check out Good Morning Veronica, and also you can find out more. And Indicate. Great. I can hear you now. Okay. No, you're bad. Whatever. It's fine. This is what's going to happen. Indicate, of course, go check it out. Sarah works with them every year and is so entwined in the Indicate universe. And also, her website should be coming up in our chat. I think it's sarahelmaleh.com. Yep, I'm getting nods that is correct. Great. Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us, even though we can't see you or talk to you anymore. But that's the way it goes. At least we got the rest of it out. She's crying. I can vaguely see the tears running down her face. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Good Tips for Hard Times, and thank you to all of our mods for keeping this space friendly. You can watch the video of this anytime at Games Hotline YouTube channel, which is gameshotline.com/gameshotline. Nope, it's youtube.com/gameshotline. You know, it's just there are too many of the same words happening. You know the drill. You've been here before. The Games Hotline is a free resource for everyone, so if you want to help us keep it that way, please head over to gameshotline.org/donate and share a few bucks if you can. And please join me next week when I'll be talking to Emma Kamina about improving conditions for game workers. Bye.